time for further debate. I recognize the member for Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I'm pleased to be able to stand in my place on behalf of the fine folks from Oshawa and speak on the 2024 budget. This is the supposedly the named Building a Better Ontario Act, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of the perspectives from my community, although I will say, Speaker, that the community perspectives that I'm sharing are going to sound familiar because we are hearing it from across the province. Unfortunately, this is a budget that misses the mark, that folks from across the province don't see what it is that they need to get by in this budget. And if folks are looking for change, it isn't in this budget. If people are looking for a family doctor, they're not going to be reassured with this government's plan. A young person trying to find affordable housing is going to come up short with this budget. If people are struggling with the cost of living, there isn't anything in this budget for them. Unfortunately, this is a budget that is out of touch, and it would seem that they're out of ideas, doubling down on policies that have been failing people. And so I'm glad to be able to rise and point out a few specifics that we would have wished to have seen in this budget. While I am the member for Oshawa, I am the only non-government provincial member in the Durham region. There are 7 MPPs that have been elected to represent the entire Durham region, and I'm the only non-government, and that's been true for the 10 years I've been elected. I've always been this little orange island, and for a while it was in a sea of red, now it's in a sea of blue. But regardless, it would seem that I have the only voice that can rise up against the government of the day and perhaps challenge them. And I hope that my colleagues from the neighbouring ridings that are government members are indeed advocating in the back rooms or to the Premier, but publicly, I guess it's up to me. So one of the things that I have raised in this House, and we've talked about in our community, is the need for investment in healthcare and the need to invest in the future for access to health care, specifically a hospital in the Durham region. Oshawa would like that hospital to be in Oshawa. Every community wished that it would be chosen and put in their community, but there was a panel and a task force put together by Lakeridge Health, and Whitby was the chosen site. And so the Premier of this province had said on our local radio about that hospital in Whitby, quote, "Is it going to be tomorrow? Not tomorrow, but down the road. Very shortly, we will be issuing the planning grants. Right now, for a short period, we're not issuing any planning grants, but is Durham right in line for the next go-round? 100% they are." He had said also, quote, "There's going to be a Whitby hospital," end quote. There isn't any planning grant in this budget. There wasn't in this budget before. The government has said, oh, we don't put planning grants in the budget. Well, where the heck do you put them? Put them somewhere. Tell us that $3 million or whatever it is coming so that folks in Durham can look to the future and know that at least some of their health care needs will be met. So that is, we continue to put this at the feet of the government, that the people of Durham region need medical investment, need medical care, need a hospital. But hospitals, Speaker, are under pressure. Part of the reason that we are looking to the future and need to see that is moving ahead. The government is spending $1 billion less on health care, and people are facing higher or longer wait times, ER closures. The galleries were filled today with folks from Durham, not Durham region. Durham, there's another Durham, and they're losing their emergency room. They're losing their hospital. They're here wearing shirts saying "Save the Durham Hospital," and it's a reminder of what the folks from Minden went through in their yellow shirts. They came here asking that their health care access be saved. And it's sort of like, it feels like deja vu. It's a year later, and it seems to be following the same script. So I would say that all communities across the province need to brace themselves, because this is not a government investing in a stronger future for healthcare. They're actually pulling it away. And the folks who came from Durham are probably entering the next chapter of their lives where they're actually reaching for more health care. So, Speaker, we're seeing that hospitals are under pressure. Certainly, unfilled nursing vacancies, they've more than doubled since the start of the pandemic. And I want to share from ONA, the Ontario Nurses Association, had put out a piece called "The Ford Budget Promises Cannot Be Trusted to Improve Care in the Public System," says Ontario Nurses Association. I will quote from the ONA provincial president, who said, quote, "There are several actions this government could and should have taken to address the healthcare crisis it has created. Instead, Ontarians will see their taxpayer money flowing to for-profit private corporations as the public health care system falls further into disrepair." She goes on to say, quote, "This meagre one-year increase does not begin to address Ontario's hospitals' budgets, some of which are using lines of credits to pay off their debts." That is a sad state of affairs, and that's from ONA. I will continue sharing voice from nurses, from RNAO. They have highlighted that the number of Ontario nursing vacancies unfilled for 90 days or more have more than doubled since the start of the pandemic. This number has remained around 10,000 since the last quarter, 2022, and they have recommendations. So they have said, quote, "To address Ontario's nursing crisis, barriers that stand in the way of retaining and recruiting nurses and advancing their career pathways must be removed. This includes action on compensation and workloads. Policymakers must also leverage opportunities to pave the way for a brighter future for nursing in Ontario. This is the only way to emerge from this crisis with a stronger nursing profession and health system." And their specific recommendations, compensation. They've said to increase compensation for Ontario nurses in all roles, domains and sectors so it is competitive with compensation in other jurisdictions, including the U.S. Address pay disparities among nurses working in different sectors, including home care and long-term care, by harmonizing their compensation upwards. Some of their other recommendations regarding workloads: ensure safe and healthy workloads for nurses by increasing nurse staffing and supports across all sectors. Provide mentorship supports, provide leadership training, increase career development opportunities, register internationally educated nurses, increase nursing education seats and funding, expand nursing education pathways, return nurses to the workforce, eliminate racism and discrimination. Those are a whole whack of very clear, able to be implemented recommendations. We don't see in this budget what we would want to in terms of funding to be able to act on those recommendations. We should be listening to nurses. Speaker, I have another article here, CTV. It's called "Ontario May Not Meet Long-Term Care Direct Care Target Due to Staff Shortages." And this is, we just talked about the systemic shortage of nurses. But as of this year, there's a need for 13,200 additional nurses and 37,700 PSWs in Ontario. And this is a document that is referenced in this article that was prepared for the long-term care minister. Charlene Stewart has said, quote, "Every time the government announces that they're going to have all these thousands of new beds, we're sitting on the sidelines saying, who's going to staff those homes?" She said some of them, referring to the PSW, some of them, they don't last 6 weeks, says Stewart. Quote, "A lot of them go in and say the workloads are just too heavy, the conditions are unsafe, and they move on. So we've had reported close to 50% of new hires leave within the first between 6 months and definitely after a year. So it's a continuous revolving door." And this is from a document that the minister has in front of him. The government knows that they're dealing with a shortage. They're getting information. So where do we see in the budget that we can rectify these challenges? That we can address compensation and workload for PSWs, training? We don't see it. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to highlight a success story in our riding. So during COVID, a lot of our communities had stories of folks who came up with creative solutions, who rallied to meet a changed need. And one of those stories in our community is Mission United, which was housed at the Backdoor Mission in downtown Oshawa. And this is a partnership across many organizations to support street-involved community members, especially during COVID it started, but it has continued. It has grown, it has changed, and it's meeting the acute medical needs of those who would otherwise not have access to medical care. It is building relationships with them so that they can perhaps connect with a service partner in the community they otherwise wouldn't have known about. And it is having success. It is also having challenges and struggle. And I want to say that when I had flagged this issue, and I've done it a few times because their funding has almost run out now twice, I want to thank the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions that when I raised this issue, he listened, he acted, and actually came at my request to the Backdoor Mission, to the Mission United project in Oshawa, saw for himself, and also listened to listen to community members, listened to the partners, and I'll say, even to his credit, came back another time unannounced so that he could see, wanted to make sure that it was indeed what they said that they were. And the government funded. The government funded so it can continue. And then we were in the same position again, where the funding was about to run out, and again we got that one-time funding. And remember, this is to meet the medical needs of street-involved community members. So what I want to say is, after the back and forth and the advocacy and the understanding of the minister, I want to actually say thank you, because there is funding now that is not year to year. It still is short term, but it allows us to figure out our next chapter, and that's not a small thing. But that is a perfect example of a community that came together, created a solution, and that the government recognized was a positive thing. There are positive things happening across communities, and we hope that the government would indeed fund those as they come across them. So, recognizing the opportunity to appreciate that, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to continue to do the work alongside the partner agencies with Backdoor Mission, Mission United, CMHA. I want to thank Drs. Ho, Dr. Mounier. I want to thank Stephanie, the folks at Backdoor Mission and the ED, and just like everyone at CMHA who have been working so hard to help very real people with very real needs. Speaker, I'm hoping to be able to continue to work with the Minister for Mental Health and Addictions to address the needs that are not being met in our community for youth and youth mental health. So I've been reaching out with community partners, and we're hoping that could be something maybe in the next budget to address mental health needs of youth in Oshawa, in our community. Speaker, while I'm talking about healthcare and kids, I had the opportunity to meet with a pediatrician, Karen Mandel, and Maureen Cuddy, who's a neonatal nurse practitioner, and they've been doing unbelievable work in our community, and they have put together a proposal, the Kids Care Pediatric Health Team. There's a very real need, Speaker, and it's strange to imagine that babies aren't getting the health care that they need. They're so vulnerable, right? They're brand spanking new, and there's no doctor who will take them. Very few doctors will take on newborns. Numbers-wise, there aren't enough family doctors, and very few are setting up practice because they can't make a living. That's another conversation. But what I'll say specifically about this Kids Care Pediatric Health Team, it was an application of Vision for Children's Care in Durham Region. The Ministry of Health had a call for proposals for new models of care, partnership models. They were due in June of 2023. We're coming up on a year. Some places have heard that they've received funding, others have heard nothing. We've heard nothing on this particular model, and it's a really impressive model. It has sort of loosely been working out of a pediatric clinic right now, but they're looking for that funding to grow it to serve babies. Well child visits, routine visits, for health maintenance. It doesn't need to be done by an MD. It could be a nurse practitioner, someone who can teach and care. We've got young parents with a brand new baby who don't know what to do with this child. And they're seeing people who for 5 or 6 months with a new baby have never seen a doctor. Imagine that for a moment. I have not been a new mom. But all of us can imagine that when you have a brand new baby, you want to ensure you're doing the right thing. But when there aren't doctors, when you cannot have those wellness checks, we're missing a step. So this is a plan. This was an application that's before the government, and it's just lost. Like, I don't know where it is. They haven't heard anything. It was received, and that's the only thing that they've got. But this is a good idea. And if it's not, if the government has a problem with some part of the application, work with them, because we have need for babies, newborns, to be receiving medical care, because they've got so many cases that they've come across as this pediatric clinic that are lucky enough to have a neonatal nurse practitioner who draws from years' experience, and they're hearing that bad things are happening. So I'm hoping that someone in the ministry is watching this and can find that application and work with them, fund them. Speaker, I want to talk a bit about homelessness, and rent is so unbelievably high. In Oshawa, it's really bad. It's bad all over, but we are hearing from tenants who cannot find affordable rent. Now, people who aren't actually legally considered tenants, but who are boarders, that will answer an ad to share a room, or answer an ad for a room in a home for maybe $800, and they get there and there's another adult on the other side of the room, and that a stranger that they're meant to live with. And they're not tenants. They're not protected by the Landlord-Tenant Board, which is not being appropriately funded. The backlog is wild. But we have so many people who are struggling, and we don't see the money in this budget to address our housing challenges. The budget admits it's never been more expensive to own a home. Young families and newcomers have been totally priced out of home ownership, and that's going to continue to rise. This government is not meeting their own goal of building 1.5 million homes. The government lumped long-term care home beds into their overall housing count to pump up the numbers. But even by that, they're still falling short of the target. The affordable housing commitments are shockingly low. They've just built 8% of the affordable homes that this government said that they'd build back in 2018. That's the number I have here is 1,187 homes in 6 years that have been built. That number might be a bit different today, but it's not enough. And people don't have places to live. There's such a struggle for people also to have remedy that if something goes sideways. I'm hearing from tenants, and I'm hearing from neighborhood landlords. Roxy, that I heard from in my riding, she has a home that she rents, and she's had a really rocky journey with bad tenants. In this case, has been through the Landlord-Tenant Board, like the tribunal has issued the eviction notice. But did you know that in Oshawa we only have one sheriff? And so it's taken, my understanding is, not in that case but in others, 4 months for that sheriff to be able to go and enforce that eviction. That's a long time for a neighborhood landlord who's trying to make ends meet, and who's also trying to be a part of the solution to housing people, right? We're talking basements. We're talking, a small home. These aren't corporate landlords. These are our neighbors. But nothing is working for anyone with the LTB right now, and that is not okay. And the money is not in this budget to address this, to fix it. Speaker, no surprise to anyone here that I've run out of time. And I have so much. I'd like another 20 minutes, if I may, on education, but perhaps during the questions and comments, my colleagues would be so kind as to ask me about education, because I have thoughts to share. But before I wrap up, Speaker, I want to say this is a budget that missed an opportunity. And the thing is, I do believe the government members read their emails and speak to people in their community, and they do know that things are tough for real people. So we would have expected to see some real solutions that will have that impact on people's day-to-day lives, and it's missing from this budget. So I'm encouraging the government to do better. Thank you.
It's now time for questions and answers. I recognize the member for Thornhill.
Thank you, and through you, Speaker. I listened to the member, and you know, like her, I'm interested in our most vulnerable, and I think the member from Mississauga Centre earlier talked about our heartfelt interest in our most vulnerable, which are our seniors, and they're a crucial part of our communities. They've helped build this province, and one of the things that our government did was expand the Ontario Guaranteed Annual Income System program to provide more supports to seniors across this province. And I was just wondering if the member would support that, given she does care about the seniors who are most vulnerable.
Back to the member for Oshawa.
Thank you. And I do support our seniors. You know, I personally have one of my own at home. I have a 103-year-old grandma that I'm glad is still feisty and snarky. She's a wild little beast, but anyway. And she's very fortunate. She had been a homeowner. She is still able to afford to live, and she's getting very good care at a home in the region. I worry, though, about seniors that are not able to enter care, that can't afford to live. I worry about those seniors who are facing long-term care in private homes that don't have the PSWs, don't have the medical support, don't have the space for them, with exorbitant fees. And I see the privatization of our long-term care system and what it looks like when things go wrong, what it looks like even day to day, and that is heartbreaking. So sure, small increases here and there that are going to put a couple more dollars in someone's bank account, but that doesn't put a roof over their head, and it doesn't help them sleep at night knowing that they are safe with the care that they deserve.
Further questions? I recognize the member for London North Centre.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank my friend from Oshawa for an excellent presentation on Bill 180. I did want to ask, and I know the member herself is an educator as well, that within Bill 180, school violence does not appear once. The government says that they care about this, yet we only see mentions of cameras in hallways and vape detectors. Would the member like to comment, with their background and their expertise in education, about the things that are lacking in the budget for education?
To the member for response.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be able to talk about education. And violence in our classrooms and in our schools are complicated matters. And the thing is, children with complex needs require support and a plan for that support. And you know, we've been hearing from educators who have talked about the need for smaller classes, the smaller class sizes, that you need to have specialized supports for children who are struggling. We're not seeing that. The government isn't actually talking about violence in a way that is strategy-based. We need adequate funding that meets the diverse needs of students. We need to reduce class sizes. They should be ensuring compliance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act as well. There are layers to this.
Response.
This isn't about vilifying anyone. This needs to be about keeping people safe, whether that's an educator, the other students in the classroom, and there isn't a plan in this budget or anywhere on those government benches.
Further questions? I recognize the member for Eglinton Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member from Oshawa for her comments. I was very happy to see the investments in healthcare in this budget, and I think all of us share an interest in making sure we have the best health care available for our constituents. And I know the member mentioned that she was pleased that the Minister of Mental Health had worked with her to ensure that a community group was getting ongoing funding. So there are some great investments in the budget, including an extra $2 billion over 3 years for home and community care, and a 4% increase in hospital funding, the first new medical school in Canada focused on training family doctors. and also the primary care investments, an additional $546 million for more primary care interdisciplinary teams. And the member said she expects this budget to do things to help people, and I wanted to ask, don't you think these are important investments to help people in your community and all of ours? Thank you.
Back to the member for response.
I think the folks at home need to understand that these are big numbers, so they sound impressive, but they don't go as far when we're seeing increasing costs, whether due to inflation or whether due to the government's stubborn, commitment to privatization, where we're seeing those dollars having to go to private nursing agencies that cost so much more than paying nurses in our public system. So when there's more money going in, or if there's more money going in, so much more of it is going out through those privately drilled holes in the bottom of the bucket, right? So we need to have the kind of funding that not just keeps up with inflation, but that meets the needs of what the hospitals are laying out for the government, of what it is that they need. You can't just have beds, you have to have people staff them. You have to have those, the care providers. When we're just open the newspaper and you see that the doctors aren't happy with you, nurses aren't happy with you, PSWs are leaving the field. So obviously something is missing. So big dollar numbers do not equal care. Fix it.
For the questions, I recognize the member for Spadina, Fort York.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the member from Oshawa for her comments today. I know both she and I were teachers before we became MPPs. And the thing that actually got me into politics was the former Conservative government was deliberately undermining and creating a crisis in our schools in order to bankrupt and privatize them. This government is doing the same thing. They've underfunded our schools. There's an inflationary funding cut of $1,500 per student. There are 5,000 fewer educators in our schools than there would have been if the government had kept up with the rate of inflation than they were at the beginning when they took power in 2018. What is the member from Oshawa seeing in Durham schools? Because what is the impact of these cuts on the students in Durham?
Back to the member for response.
So going back in time, I remember being an educator, and I had something that was called an educational assistant, and I loved them. They were great. They could assist with education needs. And now EAs, they don't have the opportunity to help students educationally speaking. There are so few of them in schools. They deal with behaviors, they deal with safety issues, and while that is important and matters, we are seeing such an underfunding. So there isn't the support for students. Small classes where students can be more successful, those are being eliminated. That children who had that smaller class and the support that went with it are now going to find themselves thrown into the mainstream where there isn't the support in the classrooms. And what that looks like remains to be seen, right? When you have fewer and fewer students who are going to be able to be successful, that doesn't serve anyone, let alone the students.
For the questions, I recognize the member for Scarborough Centre.
Speaker, we all know the importance of building more homes across the province. I know especially young people are seized with the issue as they become concerned that the dream of home ownership will never be a reality. That is why I'm so glad that the new measures in Budget 2024 has taken to provide new support to ensure we are hitting our goals of 1.5 million new homes by 2031. So my question is to the member opposite. Will you support our government investment of $1.8 billion in infrastructure funding we are providing to our municipalities and vote on the budget 2024? Thank you.
Back to the member from Oshawa for response.
Okay, so as the government member just said, it's so hard for people to imagine seeing themselves buying a home or being able to get into home ownership. The budget admits it's never been more expensive to own a home, right? Young families, newcomers have been priced out of it. The government has predicted that prices will rise. And you've asked if I support the government and it's meeting its goals, it's not even meeting its own goals of building those 1.5 million homes, right? The government counted long-term care beds into their new home numbers. Like, that's kind of, you know, padding the numbers, and those numbers don't even add up. I will say that, you know, the funding in the budget for municipalities, it comes close, but it does not, it doesn't fill in the full need of municipalities, right? The Conservatives have a history of holding back funding. We'll watch to see whether they even get that. So I don't support something I don't believe, right?